In this video, I compare Baizhu, Nahida, and the Dendro Traveler's damage in all 7 Dendro reactions. The results are sure to surprise you. I put a lot of time and effort into each one of my videos, so if you like this video, please subscribe. I had several questions before starting this project, like how much damage does Baizhu's passive talent really add, and is he really better than the Dendro Traveler or Nahida? If so, by how much exactly? Well, I finally have the answers. For this experiment, I chose my usual test subject, the Ion Blight Drake. Also, if there's a character that I feel represents a certain reaction, I use them to demo that reaction damage. However, burning is a reaction that hasn't got much love from the devs. I tried several different pyro characters and team compositions, but ended up settling on this weird team with Linny. Ultimately, I chose him because he can easily apply pyro, without having to wait for a cooldown. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to slay the Drake before it starts flying around, unless I want to sacrifice burning damage, which would kind of defeat the purpose. So Linny was a good option because he can shoot down the Drake, and he can still deal a little bit of damage even with this neutered setup. Burning damage scales from character level, elemental mastery, and the enemy's pyro resistance. So if I sacrifice any elemental mastery for attack stats, the burning damage would immediately decline. Kazuha makes a lot of sense here because he is often built with pure EM stats. This helps if Kazuha causes the burning reaction, but what's most important is 4-piece VV to shred pyro resistance. I tried having a second pyro character in the group, but I found it hard to keep enough Dendro applied. So to keep the fire burning, I chose Yao Yao. I also tried having a healer in the group for Nahida and the Traveler. My first and really only priority with Baizhu was making sure he stays above 50,000 max HP to get the maximum bonus from his unique passive talent. If you're not sure how he works and want to know more about Baizhu and how to use him, then check out my video on him. I'll leave a link in the description. As for Nahida and the Dendro Traveler, their priorities change depending on the reaction. I tried to keep their builds fairly similar to give them as close of a comparison as I could. However, Dendro Traveler's burst does not play well with fire. There's basically no avoiding exploding her burst, which is why she's equipped with 2-piece Noblesse Oblige and Wolfang. Nahida doesn't have to worry about her abilities exploding in her face, so she's using one of my favorite builds for her. She could use a bit more crit rate, but because of her unique abilities, she gets extra crit rate from her elemental mastery. But like with Baizhu, if you want to know more about Nahida, then check out my guide on her. The link is in the description. Now let's get to the first results. Being as at the time of writing this, Baizhu still has 7 days left on his banner, I'll start with his results first. Well, if this doesn't look very impressive, that's because it's not. Burning is a very underwhelming reaction, and is best used in melt teams. Even though this 3000 burning damage happens about 4 times a second, its damage ranges anywhere from about 1000 to a bit over 3000. It depends on who triggers the reaction. This is where Baizhu's downsides can come into play. You need a lot of HP on him, but Dendro reactions scale from elemental mastery. Despite having the weakest burning reaction in the group, Baizhu's special talent led to the highest burning damage overall. His fastest and highest DPS was nearly tied with Nahida, but because of the extra burning damage, Baizhu takes the first win as the top support role for burning. The Dendro Traveler performed well, but because her burst would basically instantly explode upon casting, she came in last. Okay, so not a huge surprise so far. After all, Baizhu does provide a 100% damage bonus for burning. What is surprising is that it's still very close to Nahida's max burning damage. But now let's move on to the next reaction, Bloom. Because Kaveh has some unique abilities, I felt he best represents Bloom. I seriously spent hours adjusting builds and trying out multiple characters. Even the reactions that I thought would be very easy to build, I ended up adjusting until I was able to optimize that particular reaction's damage. So I ended up using this hybrid build for Xingqiu. Like with the other Dendro reactions, Bloom largely scales with EM. So Kokomi is using 4-piece Flower of Paradise Lost, which not only boosts EM, but gives an incremental damage bonus to Bloom, Burgeon, and Hyperbloom. Kaveh is using the 4-star event weapon, the Mailed Flower, and 4-piece Deepwood Memories to shred Dendro resistance. In order to maintain 50,000 HP on Baizhu, he's using the same build as with Burning, except this time there's an extra 25% bonus for having 2 Hydro characters, so I swapped out his HP Sands for Elemental Mastery. Like with Burning, he still has the lowest personal Bloom damage in the group, but the added EM still helps. Because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to destroy the Drake in a single rotation, Lumine is equipped with ER and EM artifacts. Nahida doesn't have the same ER limitations, so she's using a similar build as last time. I did run into a couple of issues. Baizhu and the Dendro Traveler applied just enough Dendro off-field to make this team viable. Although I found that Lumine did create slightly more blooms than Baizhu, which is why she has a slightly better score. Because Nahida applies more than enough Dendro off-field, she was able to create a lot more Dendro cores for Kaveh to explode. So even though Baizhu's team did the most bloom damage out of the three, I chose Nahida as the top bloom support role. Now, let's get to the more powerful reactions, starting with the 5-star version of Kaveh, Nilou. She's special enough that she has her very own Dendro reaction, Bountiful Cores. It works very similar to Bloom, but with a couple of exceptions. Nilou's cores explode nearly instantly and are much stronger. To try and get every bit of extra damage I could, I ranked up some weapons and artifacts until I ran out of resources. By ranking up Nilou's weapon from level 70 to 80, I was able to get a whole 9% extra damage from her Bountiful Cores, which really probably wasn't worth it. I used Cyno again in this group, but instead equipped him with a similar build to Kokomi's in the Bloom test. Yaoyao is using the highest EM artifacts that I have for Deepwood Memories to increase her Bountiful Core damage. Yaoyao is one of my favorite characters for this reaction. Not only is she incredibly fun, but she applies so much Dendro with her burst that she becomes one of the main damage dealers. Baizhu helps boost her damage and is using a very similar build to last time. But from here on out, if I were to use any of these teams in the Abyss, they would likely need more energy recharge. But because Bountiful Cores is so powerful, I have Lumine equipped with this pure EM build. I changed things up for Nahida and instead focused on her Bountiful Core damage by using a very similar build as Lumine. Now onto the results. It's a similar story as with the Bloom team. Baizhu still had the most powerful reaction damage, but basically tied with the Dendro Traveler. This is because she can apply slightly more Dendro than Baizhu, resulting in more cores, which adds up to more damage overall. However, Nahida takes the win in this category because of all the extra Dendro she applies, and the extra EM she provides for the on-field character. Again, I find it surprising that her max Bountiful Core damage was very close to Baizhu's. I really thought Baizhu's 100% extra damage bonus would translate to more damage overall. I even made sure that Cyno received healing from Baizhu's burst to get the bonus on him before switching to Yaoyao. But let's see how well Baizhu does with Burgeon reactions. Toma is the undisputed king of Burgeon. He usually needs more energy recharge, but between Katane Crossspear and Yaoyao's build with Favonius Lance, if you play your cards right, there can be just enough energy particles for Toma. Cyno is using a pretty standard build with an ER Sans, although I didn't really need any extra ER because I was able to clear the Drake nearly as fast as with Bountiful Cores. Baizhu's build hasn't changed much. Since I've been using a mix between crit and EM on Nahida, I set up Lumine pretty similarly. I used Farina's signature weapon to help boost her crit damage. I have to say that I was not expecting Lumine to be as competitive as she's been. I was expecting a lot wider gap in the results, but she was only within a couple of seconds of Baizhu and Nahida, both of which nearly tied. Baizhu is still technically providing the largest reaction damage, but because Dendro can be cleared by applying Pyro and Hydro, it can be tricky to apply enough Dendro and Hydro to explode the cores with Toma's burst. This is why I gave Nahida the win, yet again. I suppose that shouldn't be much of a surprise, being as she's the Dendro Archon, but don't worry, this video isn't all about Nahida. Let's see how well they did in Hyperbloom. Because Hyperbloom is just the Electro version of Burgeon, or maybe it's the other way around. Either way, I was able to keep Baiju's, Lumine's, Nahida's, and Cyno's setup the same as before. Shinobu takes Toma's place with the same exact artifacts and Zypho's Moonlight for her weapon. Shinobu has low-key become one of my best characters, and this is my default setup for her. Kaveh took over for Yaoyao. She's using Sacrificial Bow to make sure she always has her skill active. Turns out that I didn't end up needing it. Because she's not level 90, I wasn't really able to use her in the other groups. But because Shinobu is the one triggering the reaction here, it doesn't really matter what level she is, just that she applies Dendro. Everyone had nearly identical times here, but the win goes to Baizhu, solely because his team had the highest Hyperbloom damage. Before starting this project, I honestly thought that Baizhu was going to have the best results for all the reactions. Halfway through testing, I even stopped what I was doing to make sure I was properly activating Baizhu's passive. But the 100% damage bonus for all the reactions I've covered so far just doesn't add up to that much of an increase. Perhaps things will change with the final 2 reactions, Spread and Aggravate. Let's see just how big of a difference his 40% damage bonus actually ends up being. Starting with Alhaitham, who identifies as Spread. He's using my latest favorite build with the Black Sword and EM artifacts. If you want to know more about Alhaitham and how his Dendro biscuits, patent pending, work, then check out my video on him. Like with the other characters, the link will be down in the description. I have Fischl using 4-piece Golden Troop and the Stringless. To be honest, I have a better build for Fischl, but I didn't want her dealing too much damage. I wanted to make sure that I was able to fully test the reaction, which is why Shinobu is equipped with 4-piece Deepwood Memories. She also applies Constant Electro, which, along with all the Dendro being flung around, keeps quick and active, so Alhaitham is free to spread all he wants. I left Baizhu set up alone again, although with Nahida, I decided to try something new. I have her equipped with 2-piece Golden Troop and Gilded Dreams. To be honest, I ran out of EM artifact combinations, but this actually worked really well. The Dendro Traveler is using a similar build as last time. I am really surprised with this setup though. Not only did Lumine's team have the fastest time in this entire video, but she even boosted Alhaitham's spread damage enough to finally break Baizhu's streak of highest reaction damage. Although Nahida's team technically takes the win for the highest spread damage. But the crown here goes to the Dendro Traveler. I really had to think about what happened here. But C6 Dendro Traveler gives Alhaitham a very nice Dendro damage bonus, as well as a decent EM bonus. This just outclasses Baizhu's 40% damage bonus by a hair. But because Lumine is capable of boosting her team's damage and dealing a decent amount of damage herself, she's just hands down better than Baizhu for spread teams. So what are your thoughts so far? I really want to know. Did you expect the Dendro Traveler to perform so well? Let me know in the comments. Okay. Now onto the final Dendro reaction, Aggravate. This test ended up being extremely aggravating. I'll leave the jokes to Cyno. He is really punny after all. He's using nearly identical artifacts as Alhaitham, but I went a few rounds with the Drake and I switched his sands from EM to attack. This still left him with 300 EM, and it did increase his damage a bit. I wish I could have ranked up his weapon from 80 to 90, but I was all out of resources at this point. It still left him with similar stats to Alhaitham. I tested nearly all of my Animo support units to make sure these two get a fair comparison. I decided on C6 Sucrose. Her C6 allows her burst to give a 20% electro damage bonus to everyone in the party, and she increases everyone's EM. Because Cyno is such an energy hog, Venti might be more practical. However, Fischl is an excellent battery. I left her build the same as last time because I wanted Cyno to be able to do more damage. But all of the highest damages that are recorded are from summoning Oz. To keep things somewhat consistent, I left Lumine and Nahida's build the same as before, but I did end up making some adjustments with Baizhu. After several different trials, at some point I tried using Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. The problem was that this attack bonus from the weapon didn't end up adding up to much, and Oz would be gone well before Cyno and Baizhu's burst ended. This led to a huge decrease in damage, so I left this weapon on Baizhu since he still has above 50k HP, and kept this weird rotation that maximized Oz's on-field time. I'll say that I was expecting Baizhu to take the cake in this category. I didn't think it would really be a contest. But what I wasn't expecting was to have to retry Baizhu's team 6 times to get more competitive results. Now, before I get to the final results, if you've made it this far, please take a second and tap that subscribe button. At one point this year, I had a lofty goal to be at 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. But now all I want is to finally get past 2,700. I seriously put a lot of time and effort into my videos, and I would love to have your support. Subscribing is free and you can always change your mind. Now without further ado, the final crown goes to the Dendro Traveler. For all the same reasons as with Spread, she worked the best with Cyno as well. Her C6 gives Cyno a 12% extra damage bonus. As far as the highest damage, I got lucky with Nahida's team and Fischl hit a couple huge crits when summoning Oz. Although she nearly tied with Baizhu, he still came in last. You can see that I redid the first and third rounds to get more competitive times with Baizhu's team. I even went back through and made sure that Cyno was getting Baizhu's bonus by having him start a battle with half HP, but it seems like it doesn't matter. Baizhu overhealing still seems to count as getting healed by his burst. Originally, I was going to include an entire section on him and Cyno while making my most recent video about Baizhu, but I was kind of running into the same problem. He didn't seem to make that much of a difference compared to Nahida or the Traveler, but I thought this was because I still had Cyno at level 80 at the time, so I didn't end up talking about Cyno in that video. Well, now that I know that, even though Baizhu and Cyno work well together, the Dendro Traveler can be better with the right gear. I know this doesn't cover every circumstance, and that Baizhu would still likely be a better option for the Abyss when compared to the Dendro Traveler, especially since in a longer fight, Lumine would need more energy recharge. So here are the overall results for Baizhu's Dendro reaction damage. He saw the highest average increase with Bloom, closely followed by Burning. Burgeon and Hyperbloom also resulted in a nice increase, although I was expecting for Bountiful Cores to be one of his top 3. But if this video proved anything, it proved that my expectations of Baizhu were too high. It is really nice to finally see just how big of a difference he really makes. Well, if you haven't already, let me know in the comments what you think about my results, and hit that like button while you're down there. I know that I was surprised. I'm trying my best to get more videos out, but I don't really know what I'm doing, so it takes some time. It seriously would help a lot if you subscribe, or if you have already, share this video with your friends. I can't wait to read your comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Subscribe.